Hi everyone, welcome to this webinar of Redefining AI Ethics, where we're mapping harms and demanding accountability. I'm Sidrah, and I'm really excited to be joined by a fantastic panel. But while we are waiting to get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourselves? Where are you joining from? What are your roles? Just pop it in the chat. It'd be really good to know how many people we've got across the world joining us and having this critical dialogue. It's very excited. How are you all feeling, speakers? Are you excited? Ready to go?
Ready, yes.
Yeah. I'm absolutely excited. I've got like nervous butterflies in my stomach, but excited, nervous butterflies.
We've hit the first hurdle. It says that someone has shared that the chat isn't available. It's in the questions and answers, so that's like the workaround.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Let's do that. Let's do a pivot and pop it into the question and answers. Ah, fantastic. We've got 51 people joined so far. Okay. I think we'll give it another minute and people will start joining and then we can get started. But while we wait, my elevator question for our speakers is, how's the weather where you are? It's very nice and sunny and mild in Edinburgh, Scotland. What about you, Vicente?
Partially cloudy, hot, and it was a very sunny day here in Madrid, Spain today.
Nice. Asma?
Same here in Malaga, very cloudy.
What about yourself, Jessica?
Yeah, here in the Netherlands, I think we were gifted like one more final day of summery weather before it's like 6 straight months of rain.
Before it just plunges.
Lots of rain, but it's okay. Rain is good as well. But today was sunny and beautiful. A good day to talk about important topics.
Absolutely. On that note, let's get started as we have more people joining us. So, thank you everyone for joining. I'm really excited to welcome you to our webinar. As I've mentioned, it's our webinar on redefining AI ethics. We're mapping AI harms and demanding accountability. And this is part of our UNGA 80 side event. So, thank you so much for joining. Now, the aim today for this webinar really is to bring together expert voices with the panelists that you can see with me. Experts in children's human rights, AI governance, AI militarization, and we're going to have a constructive dialogue on what AI ethics and the governance landscape looks like today. Is it really protecting those who are most vulnerable to AI-enabled harms? And if not, what are the gaps and what are we doing to address those gaps? Now, I'll introduce myself. I realise I haven't done that. I'm Sidrah Hassan. I'm an AI ethicist, and I have been a member of the Ethical AI Alliance for just over a month now, working towards value-aligned initiatives, really, and this being one of them. How can we bring true accountability in governance and true ethics in AI ethics? Because, yeah, I have definitely seen a lack thereof. And a little bit about Ethical AI Alliance. So, Ethical AI Alliance is a grassroots organization. It's made up of transdisciplinary members from tech, academia, arts to human rights. And we're all connected in the values and vision of ensuring that AI ethics has a human-centered approach. It ensures alignment with global human rights frameworks and prioritizes human rights and dignity. And that's why I'm joined by such a fantastic panel. So I am going to start off with introducing Jessica. Jessica Dorsey is an assistant professor of international law at the Utrecht University School of Law. She's also a thought leader and expert in the use of AI in warfare. We also have Vicente Raimundo, who is the Global Programs Director at Save the Children Spain and an ethical AI ambassador. And we also have Asma, who is the founder, powerhouse, and the ex-big tech corporate strategist of Ethical AI Alliance. So welcome. Thank you so much to the panel for being here.
Thanks, Sidrah.
Thank you. So what we're going to do is start off with an easy question panel. Don't worry, it's going to be nice and easy just to get you warmed up. So I'll start off with, what is the true definition of AI ethics, and are we seeing this in practice? So Jessica, I'll pass over to you.
Well, thanks so much. Thanks for having me, and thanks to everyone who's tuning in. I'm very curious to hear your feedback and to keep the conversation going. But you threw the first definition question at the lawyer, but I'm a lawyer and not an ethicist. And so there are blurred lines here, but I think that's okay. I think generally how I conceptualize of ethics is thinking about the study and the applications of fairness, accountability, transparency, and certainly with respect to AI, human-centered values in its design and deployment and governance. And those are all like really high-level abstract things. How do you then start making them realities when you start talking to industry about designing, developing across the life cycle? And how do you start talking with states about their own legal obligations? And I think just to pivot to that, ethics and law, of course, are not separate silos. Many legal norms originate in ethical debates. Things like accountability, transparency, responsibility, legitimacy, all of those are informed by both ethics and law. And I think just on the piggyback of last week's meetings in Geneva, the CCW, the Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons, and the group of governmental experts on lethal autonomous weapon systems, we had a very successful session, and the discussions, though they come from a legal place of origin, you cannot escape understanding where ethics must find its place. And so for me, ethics is not just a soft concept. It lays the groundwork for binding obligations. It informs how we interpret those obligations and how we go forward in a space with new technologies.
Absolutely, that's a fantastic answer, and thank you for starting us off, Jessica. And then over to you, Vicente, as your area of specialties is really children, well, international human rights and then children's human rights. What do you think from your background? How would you define AI ethics, and are we seeing this in practice today?
I'll start by the last question. The answer is no, we don't. And I think that we will dwell on it later. What we are seeing in Gaza, it's a very clear proof that the answer is a resounding no. But for me, not being a lawyer, my answer would be, it's we are talking here about responsible behavior to protect the most vulnerable. You have it or you don't have it. And the answer is no, we don't.
Thank you so much. And Asma, finally over to you.
Yeah, I'd like to start by saying that ethics and judging from both answers that which are both true, right? It really starts from lived experience. What is and what's definitely not is what being right now outsourced in the boardrooms, where we hear ethics and are more like PR in big tech. It is not ethics. Ethics is based on lived experience and the fact that we have today, children harmed by AI, women harmed by AI. That's the morality. That's what ethics. And obviously, it's not one universal ethical norm for the entire world. And, depending where you are, ethics can be seen differently. But it eventually has to be linked to human rights and protection of humanity and human dignity.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good point that you bring up there. What we're seeing in boardrooms and corporate, that isn't really what AI ethics is about. And actually, we are seeing more AI governance take center stage in the absence of AI ethics, shall we say. So what is the definition of AI governance? And in your experience in big tech, how is this playing out? Where is it falling short? And where is it actually doing okay, if it is?
Yeah, so we have ethics, which are the norms, right? Which is what's right, what's wrong. But then we have governance is a way of actually establishing ways for for the ethics to be in place and in practice. And governance is all these mechanisms that bring accountability and monitoring and tracking, etc. It's really in a simple way to say it is an architecture of power. That is the governance. And right now, it's not that. right now it's everything but that. It's really focused on future risks. If you go to a lot of policy and governance forums, it's going to speak about existential risks, the ones that are going to happen in 30, 40 years. That's one of like current governance scene and one of their favorite topics, when actually in reality it means really independent oversight of the technology being deployed. And we'll see this with Jessica in the case of militarization, but also enforceable obligations. It is not, and I've seen this from the other side, just about a year and a half ago, or a year and 8 months ago, I was on the other side. I was leading and implementing major tech, digital transformation for top clients worldwide. I had never seen any enforceable obligation when it came to ethics and governance. It was, nice frameworks that you could put in one of those slides, but there was no way that these had been, enforced by any other authority. So there's a conflict of interest here if the same company is publishing their own internal governance and also following it. So what's the point of it all? And that's what I want people here to understand. It's really, there's a big lack of transparency when it comes to this.
Absolutely. It's very much akin to marking your own homework. And as we've seen, we can't always expect big tech to be to show the full transparency that they're required to, and actually bring the accountability that these frameworks really talk about. And in practice, it's lacking quite a lot. You mentioned Jessica there, and absolutely, Jessica, with your expertise being in AI and how it shapes militarization, how are you seeing this play out in military and warfare right now, especially in the global south?
Look, we're seeing a number of developments at rapid pace. I mean, this is sector-wide. I mean, it's not just specific to military use of AI, but problems that exist elsewhere are, of course, exacerbated because the risk of the use of things going wrong in military uses of AI, certainly within the joint targeting cycle, when we're using these systems to generate or to nominate, to select, to locate targets for engagement or for where we will drop bombs, that is an incredibly high risk. And so if you're going to do it that way, you can't get it wrong. But at this point, what we're seeing, what I'm seeing is sort of twofold. You see a lot of the promises that companies, industry, et cetera, are laying out there about what their products can do and what they're built to do. You see a lot of flashy videos. We'll get into that a bit later, I think, about the industry's role. But then what we're seeing is the realities on the ground. Certainly in places like Gaza or the conflict in Ukraine, understanding that a lot of this, and it's very difficult to find out exactly what's being used, what kind of software is being programmed in order to effectuate these particular strikes. But what we are seeing from open reporting over the last 2 years certainly has been extraordinarily concerning. And I think your point about transparency from an industry perspective, from companies themselves, is the same exact thing that we've dealt with over the last 2 decades and longer from militaries themselves, right? So we've been pushing throughout the global war on terror, the drone wars, et cetera, for more transparency and for more accountability so that they are ensuring that as technology develops, that they are still able to ensure that their legal obligations are being met. But that's very, very difficult with remote forms of warfare. So through the drone years, over the past 20 years, and it's only getting more difficult because it's not, they don't broadcast on their weaponry if it's programmed with an AI software, et cetera, right? So it's really, really hard to understand. So transparency is certainly a problem. The speed and scale that have been introduced by these particular technologies, excuse me, again, not specific to military use only. AI improves, quote unquote, efficiency in a lot of ways. And that's a big draw for companies or for militaries trying to improve their own efficiency. But there's a trade-off when we're speeding things up, right? If you're fighting at machine speed, how do you ensure that you take the requisite steps that are necessary to ensure that you are adhering to the duty of constant care to minimize or to avoid civilian harm? Or within a targeting cycle that you're taking every feasible precaution to avoid the civilian harm, right? And then if you fail to take those precautions and you end up having to take a proportionality assessment, weighing your military advantage against your expected civilian harm, again, all of these things done at such a rapid pace makes it extraordinarily complicated to ensure that you adhere to these things. So the speed and scale is one of the issues. Again, both as a promise, but certainly also a peril. Accuracy issues and bias, this is all baked in again across the board, extracted from the military context, but certainly very prevalent. We don't know how to measure accuracy. We hear reporting about certain accuracy levels. Everybody's using different lingo and jargon to kind of sell that this is the right approach and this is, software that does quote unquote better than humans. I think it's very important that we're quite critical understanding what that means. At what point are you measuring accuracy? How are you measuring it? And it depends on the system level, right? Are you talking about accuracy in a large language model? How do you measure that, right? Like show your work and ensure compliance. That's sort of the messaging that we're trying to get through. On biases, I want to highlight a few of them. What we're starting to see, and a lot of my work focuses on those cognitive biases, what they introduce into the way that we think as humans when we interact in human-machine teaming, human-machine interaction. Sometimes these systems aren't taking the strikes themselves. They're just informing military decision-making, which in essence, there's nothing wrong on its face with informing and helping commanders make decisions. However, when it influences so much so, or if it's happening again at that speed and scale, it's very difficult to understand if the human, the commander, if she's really in charge of making that final call or is being influenced through algorithmic bias, automation bias, other cognitive biases, the action bias, for example, or anchoring bias, what these sort of quantification logics that are entrenched in these systems, what they're really introducing into the military decision-making process. And all of these biases and the reliance on the technologies can also, and we're starting to see in other fields, in the medical field was a really incredible study recently about doctors who are becoming sort of cognitively de-skilled. They're having some cognitive erosion because of the reliance on these particular systems, and that's making them less able to, for example, in this study, detect cancer, right? This is a high-risk scenario as well. Same messaging across the board. If commanders become de-skilled and unable to carry out their duties to carry out precautions, proportionality assessments, then that is opening risks to the civilians who will bear the brunt of these technologies. And that brings me to the last point of what I want to say here on the intervention. I think that because you asked about what the implications were specifically for the Global South, I think we can follow a trajectory that oftentimes countries and actors in the Global South are underserved and have a tendency that this is where the technologies will be deployed. So powerful military actors in the Global North are often using them in conflict scenarios in the Global South. They also have fewer resources in developing things. And so they're more reliant, if they are going to acquire these technologies, they're more reliant on the off-the-shelf systems coming from big tech corporations. And they have no resources or ability, and that goes for powerful military companies as well. When you buy things off the shelf, you're already beholden to a design, a development, testing, evaluation that a private company's already taken. And you have to take that either at face value or leave it on the shelf. And those are really difficult conversations to have, but these are the kinds of things, and I'll get into a bit later, about how states need to be back in the driver's seat, whether that's Global North or Global South, but the states should be in the driver's seat demanding compliance and demonstrated compliance before we get into procurement contracts, like understanding that compliance with the law doesn't need to be bolted on at the very end, but needs to be thought through at every single stage. And that goes for ethical considerations as well. And it's not always programmable. So sometimes the answer is no. I'll leave my comments there for now. Thanks.
Not at all. Thank you so much. That was it's so interesting. Thank you. One thing I wanted to highlight, which I really like that you mentioned, is that cognitive ability and actually the cognitive bias that you relying on AI products and systems introduces. And one cornerstone of AI governance frameworks is human in the loop. as long as we have human in the loop, then, you know, we're good on AI governance and that's it ticked off. But actually, what does that human in the loop really mean if they have this cognitive bias? And what does that mean for then the results that are coming out? Because that human in the loop doesn't equal ethics or governance, right? It doesn't equal unbiased. So I'd be really interested to hear, Asma, your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the perspective I wanted to bring here, like to complement what the first time Jessica and I had a chat, we could have gone on for hours because I was seeing the part where I come from a commercial background, and the thing that shocks me most, and I asked her if she sees an actual, is this like, did this just evolve over the last years with AI, or has it always been the same? And the question is, has there been always a blurring line between commercial use of technology and warfare? And I think she said no, it's never been as blurry and as confusing and as strong. And I want to quote here the latest Guardian Revelation leaks report that was a couple of weeks ago on Microsoft data centers for the unit 8200 for the equivalent of the NSA, the Israeli NSA. The fact that this data has been migrated as a cloud migration from Israel to the EU. In fact, the data is sitting in commercial, again, platform infrastructure in the EU soil, which is protected by GDPR and EAIA Act now. The fact that one handshake of a CEO, Satya Nadella in this case, with the head of the unit, can tell you pretty much everything you need to know about the governance today. How many levels of due diligence and internal procedure had to be skipped or had to be completely bypassed in order for a foreign military to have its data stored in an American company in the EU soil? Like, think about it. And I think this is what I really want to raise. I wanted to look at the whole chain. Like, we're looking into, like regulating military. But just like Amnesty International in its latest report called Big Tech a human rights crisis, exactly for this reason. The level of blurring between what we think, where we store our data, our day-to-day communication, work, entertainment, is also being used to target civilians in conflict zones. And this is the part where obviously it's, for me, maybe the biggest figure of technology, cloud infrastructure, and AI governance currently.
Yeah, we're really seeing big tech supercharge that AI and warfare, and actually it directly then links to the human rights that are being violated. Absolutely. Jessica, from your perspective, what role do you think big tech is playing here?
Oh, fairly outsized role, if we're being honest, because these technologies are dual use technologies, right? The same thing that I use to open up my cell phone, if you put it on a drone, on a Maven smart systems out in the Red Sea, you can close the kill chain, as it were, much faster because you're using that biometric data to open your cell phone and to find, fix, and engage targets on battlefields, right? So that is a huge governance challenge, because how do you regulate a technology that is so multi-purpose? However, I find that sometimes that's often a reason for there to be just a lot of like back and forth. It reminds me, if I may be permitted a meme, it reminds me of the Spider-Man meme where all the Spider-Men are just pointing at one another, right? Because it's saying, well, we're just, anyways, I'll get back on the straight path here. But the role of industry, I think they are leading in this stuff because they're the ones developing the software, and they're promising, again, it's the big promises that come out of the Palantirs, the Microsofts, the Googles, but also startup companies, right? Who are saying, we're going to be the answer to all of your efficiency needs. We will help speed up what we call the ODA loop. And I want to really quickly touch on that point you raised about the human in the loop. It used to be the jargon that was sort of like it would calm most people down. Well, if there was a human, then it was fine. And I just want to push back. And I think generally speaking, at least in the legal field, we've moved away from that phrasing because we're realizing that's not enough. Because certainly with the reporting from 972 magazine and The Guardian, understanding that at times they had 20 seconds to carry out a number of legal obligations in order to ensure that the person that they were going to drop a bomb on was the right person. In 20 seconds, oftentimes all they had the time to do was check whether or not it was a male or a female, and that's not enough time to ensure that you're upholding your legal obligations. So we've moved away from that phrasing of human in the loop, thank goodness. So now I'd say the phrase du jour, certainly within the context of the laws, the lethal autonomous weapon systems, is context appropriate human judgment and control. And that's a mouthful, and I'm aware of that. But I do think that that gets closer to what we're talking about, because it allows for a case-by-case basis and analysis. What's context appropriate here? Well, we're talking about a densely populated urban area. So we need to take more deliberations. We need to slow it down. We can't operate right now at machine speeds because that's the context, and it dictates how much human involvement must be present in order for there to be a lawful use of these particular systems. So I think rolling that out to understand that it's not a one-size-fits-all, a human in the loop is not enough to like just tick a box. And I think when you translate that again back to the beginning of the life cycle of AI systems, it's very important to engage with industry because, look, and I don't fault them, you don't need to be a lawyer or a specialist in the laws of war to work at a tech company. And lawyers who work as legal advisors within an IHL context don't need to be tech experts to do their job, but there does need to be a lot more interfacing and transdisciplinary interaction. That's why such a webinar like today is really important. I see a lot of the backgrounds of the people participating are so varied, and it's really important because we all need to be at this table. It's going to take a long time to hammer out these issues, but engaging with industry, I think, on the front end, and that's what we're trying to do through this Lawful by Design initiative that I'm involved in, is trying to make sure that there are essentially the known unknowns, what lawyers see as problematic throughout the entire life cycle, just raising those issues with industry leaders, and then trying to get programmers to sort of take that on board as a consideration throughout. And we're also trying to say, that it's also in their interest to do so, because if they can build a system that is better in ethical and legal compliance, then they're going to be able to sell that system better. And I'm not like a huge fan of like, let's make this all, put it in a capitalist jacket and put it on a shelf. But I'm trying to understand like where the sensitivity points are, what's important to each of these actors, and how to find some common ground across that. And I think this is starting to become a place for traction for industry leaders, for lawyers, and for people who are trying to integrate this into military, into their toolboxes as well.
So just a quick follow on from there. Do you think that will help leverage some accountability with big tech? Does that open the door to that accountability being created and hopefully implemented?
I think that it can. I think, and this is maybe a weird thing for a lawyer to say, but this is also something I made an intervention last week in Geneva to say, like, we've got responsibility, which I conceptualize of, and the law conceptualizes of as a legal sort of legal teeth. So individual criminal responsibility or state responsibility, those are big legal terms of art. Those are important as well. We shouldn't forget them. But accountability is something that I see as legal, but also broader, right? Mm-hmm. Accountability can be market accountability, fiscal accountability, hierarchical, right? The fact that you and your boss have an agreement that you're going to deliver something has nothing to do with the court of law. We hope. I hope you don't get that far. But the idea is that there's an accountability mechanism built into that. And again, this sort of fiscal or market accountability can be really an incentivization for industry to get on board, understanding, okay, well, if we need a market share that includes these military actors, and these military actors are interested in being responsible by design, then we need to ensure that our products are responsible by design. So we need to engage with understanding what that means. What are the legal obligations? How can we tailor our products to fit that? And I think that that's when we start seeing accountability being thought about from the beginning. And ultimately, I hope that creates less of a problem on the ground when these products are rolled out.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So talking about some of the problems on the ground, one that we definitely can't ignore is the AI-enabled harms that we're seeing on children. And I think we've seen a few recent articles as well where unfortunately, we're very aware of how these technologies from social media are now evolving into AI has affected the mental health of children and young people. Now we're seeing, AI-enabled suicide, unfortunately, which is awful. But I wanted to ask you, Vicente, so recently Save the Children had published a report and it showed that 1 in 5 young people in Spain reported being victims of AI-generated deepfakes, and almost all of them reported some form of online sexual violence, which is incredibly alarming. And I think a headline that needs to be shared widely to really understand the breadth and depth of this. It's not just isolated instances, is actually a lot more broader than we realize. How is AI influencing the life of children in your work and what you've seen?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the opportunity you have been given. And thank you very much, particularly, for giving me a chance to bring you the voices of millions of children. So I try to do three things. One is directly addressing figures. I'm trying to provide some context of what the dangers, the risk, and the harm we are seeing are. Second thing is to provide you with a view. What are we seeing in the field, both in Spain and elsewhere? And thirdly, uh, asking for things. I mean, what do we want as an organization? What are we wanting from third parties to achieve as soon as possible? For me, the founding figure is 1924. That was the year when the Geneva Declaration on the Rights of the Child was adopted by the League of Nations. And it is very important because it means that 24 years before there was a Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, you'll remember that date, the world already felt the imperative to approve a document that on that day they stated, mankind owes to the child the best it has to give, which is special care in distress, protection from exploitation, and upbringing in the spirit of social consciousness. That was 24 years before there was a Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So at the very beginning of all these systems of international law, there was a particular concern and care for children. So coming directly to the figures that you provided before, in Spain, 95% of all children use the internet on daily basis, virtually all without any supervision. 95% on daily basis. Of them, 75% have experienced online violence at least once in their life. And this was already a figure that was provided by us to a report 3 years ago, before the AI companions existed, before the deepfakes existed. So only now we know that this online violence, particularly addressed to women and girls, and particularly addressed to their sexual freedom, has increased more than tenfold already. And if we go elsewhere, we live in Spain, and we focus on children living in a conflict zone, we see that 1 in 6 children in the world are officially today living in a conflict zone in the world. So the figures say that this is prevailing, and this is a huge problem that is happening to a very particular segment of the population that is extremely vulnerable and with very little protection. So as an organization, what do we see? We see that we no longer can discuss about collateral damage, that children are no longer collateral damage, but they have become a target in themselves. For instance, discussing again Gaza, more than 37% of all people murdered in Gaza were children. No longer collateral damage. There is a purpose there. Almost 40% of those killed, 37.7, have been killed. For reference, in the Ukrainian war, less than 1%, 0.3 of those killed have been children. We are surprised to see that the voices of these children are not heard or taken into account, despite their extreme vulnerability and despite being, in many cases, again Gaza, over 50% of the population. They are not heard, their vulnerabilities are not taken into account. They are not protected. And we see, in particular, that artificial intelligence-based tools and systems are enabling the commission of atrocities against children on a devastating scale. The speed and scale that was mentioned before. We see that those systems Everything is new and everything is not new. So we have the same crimes, the same problems, but the speed and the scale of the occurrence of these problems is something totally new that we are not prepared or ready for. So what do we want? What does say the children ask for? Well, first of all, we want these crimes to be brought to light. They need to be known and recognized, that they are reported and registered in a safe, regular, and professional manner. And above all, again, my predecessor was very clear on this, is accountability. That is, that the perpetrators and those enabling them are identified and punished, and the damage repaired. And finally, this is why, in our opinion, initiatives like the AI harm map seem to us essential and pioneering in stopping the damage that new technologies are causing to children. So, thank you very much.
No, thank you, Vicente. Some horrifying figures, but absolutely, like you say, they need to be brought to light because we're not understanding how, to what extent vulnerable populations, and namely children, are affected by AI through war and conflict, but also through the use of AI, even in, you're seeing this in the global minority or the global north, that children who do have access to the internet, how they are still being targeted and facing sexual violence or online violence and harm. So thank you. Asma, Vicente, sorry, mentioned there the AI harms map. So I know in the Ethical AI Alliance as an organization, we have been having these conversations. We have been trying to map these harms, bring them to light, and as the title suggests, demand accountability. Could you shed a bit more light on that and what we've been working on, please?
Of course, and before going there, I just wanted to map out a little bit what just happened here, because I think we have one of the rare opportunity to look at the entire chain of accountability within one webinar. We have big tech or ex-big tech, we have expert in military and AI, and then we have children rights. So I think it's so interesting to see, because that's exactly breaking down these processes and is exactly what's going to give us true accountability. First, you have the big tech that sells, the enterprise infrastructure under basically neutral, right? They label it as neutral technology, but we all know that they're inherently dual use, as we know. They are dual use by design, not just as a mistake. We know by now, we have enough information to know that it was planned that way. Contracts are signed without, with governments, without due diligence, etc., with zero transparency. Then we have the military that integrates that system into their operation, intelligence gathering, predictive analytics. So all on commercial platforms again. Basically big tech continuing to provide updates, compute, technical support as the military is perpetrating harm towards children. And we get to Vicente and what he's seen, for example, with Save the Children in the context of Gaza. So children become downstream targets throughout the entire chain. What began basically as a corporate contract is ending up as a human rights violation. And that's, I think, the dimension that the fact that Amnesty International published 2 weeks ago saying that big tech, breaking up with big tech is a human rights crisis, needs to resonate with each person in this room and beyond. It's not just about tech anymore. It is a human rights crisis, that the fact that this entire chain is possible. So we now, back to your question, based on this entire, as a transdisciplinary community of people really genuinely caring for humanity and for ethics and accountability, we've noticed that governance is often reactive, really. Basically, you can't really govern what you don't see. And one of our flagship initiatives that we've been working on together with the team is really providing a visual and a sort of an AI harm map. And it's a prototype, forgive us, this is our first iteration, but we wanted to show you, and this could evolve into something much bigger that creates, that visibility necessary to make decision in governance forums. but think about it like a living document, like a living record of where governance has failed. Because if the harm occurred, that means we failed at AI governance to prevent that harm. These are all harms that occurred, reported and confirmed by very credible sources. We have we've done, data collection, data audits, etc. So instead of speculating about future risk within the current situation of governance discussions, we want to bring the conversation around actually present day consequences, just like those we've just heard directly from Vicente, and show patterns, patterns and concentration of power, and that you will understand a lot of power of big tech, etc., etc. So is the map on full screen for people? Not
No, it's
really.
small
I wonder if
screen
you could
for me
do
as well.
like, I mean, have to pin it probably to do so. Or I can share, see if I share mine. Would that work? Let me see if I can just share mine. Do you guys see it on full screen? Yeah.
That's better.
So it
It's
really
on full screen.
cool. Thank you. What it makes visible is everyday harms, sites of power and violence, and patterns of governance failures. It is a record of harms, but it is equally a record of where we failed, in governance. So it really goes from, it's a starting point for having these kind of conversation. The same one we're having in our webinar is only a taste, of what we should be doing and what governance professionals should be doing by now. But we know they don't. There are some efforts right now with the UN GA kicking off, UNGA tomorrow kicking off. We know that Costa Rica and Spain co-led an effort for an AI resolution, which is really promising, and will lead the way for, pave the way for some sort of global transdisciplinary dialogue. We look very forward to that. We're actually plan to be there on site in New York to push for accountability, and for also involving a transdisciplinary community, because like Jessica and Vicente both said, it takes this level of multidisciplinary knowledge to get to some sort of accountability. Tech alone is not going to do it. And I want to circle back to maybe something, Jessica, you said. I genuinely believe that we need to be to sort of play on multiple fronts here for accountability to happen. Like Vicente said, there will be probably, we need to have a list of perpetrators. Like this map could actually, if we were to follow the UN mechanism, this map could yield into a list of who perpetrated the harm, and should be by now like linked to human rights violation. So we have a legal case, and things could actually drive legal action. And I know that companies, corporations do react to legal action because it's money. There isn't, so that we can actually put a price tag to harms. And unfortunately, that's what that incentivize big corporation is really putting, money value to their losses, a financial value to that. So our hope is to get these kind of conversation, this kind of visibility, and facilitate real conversation around harm and accountability.
Thank you, Asma. I'm going to actually bring it back to you, so apologies. I hope you got some water there.
Sure.
I'm asking a lot, but I just wanted to ask if you could add on, what values is it that Ethical AI Alliance is bringing into this dialogue, and how can those participants that have joined today get involved if they want to with this community?
Absolutely. I think what we have is insider knowledge, as in we have AI practitioners, we have academia, humanitarians, lawyers, compliance officer, graduates also from ages, and we're global by design. So really bring that knowledge of the industry, and think of it like a platform, a network of people building on each other. Really, it's never been, we've never done any projects with one industry. It's always been, you know, law with technology, activists with an artist, because that's the only solution, the way we see it. That's the learning from each other and building on each other. Then we are very hands-on in terms of tools for accountability. We believe there's a lot of think tanks that are producing a lot of thought leadership. We are too, but would like to focus the effort into you know, tools that can be implemented, that can be built upon, such as this map, such also as we're also in the very early stages of building an ethical AI sort of community-led label type of thing that works like a watchdog for AI application based on the knowledge of the community. And truly global by design, we believe in pretty much the fact that AI doesn't belong to the West, right? Like as easy as we need to decentrate from the same actors every time. And some of the best solution in AI and technology will emerge from the global South, from Africa, Asia. And so we want to go and engage with organizations and understand what's happening and facilitating the dialogue. I am myself, I'm North African, I'm immigrant based in Europe, but you see in our community, we have a really pretty much every continent represented, and we welcome people from all over the world and perspectives. I think the only red line is caring for humanity. This is where we don't really compromise, but other than that, we're very open, to learning from each other.
Thank you so much. You're absolutely right. I think when we talk about the whole AI life cycle and supply chain, in this race to the bottom, we see governments talk about sovereignty, and really that naturally brings the silos up. But what Ethical AI Alliance is trying to do is break down those silos, understand how we can work with other organizations and other areas to really map out these harms and make it as obvious as possible as to what's happening, so that demanding accountability can start to happen as well. So thank you very much, Asma. Now, I've got one last question for all of my speakers before we move on to the Q&A with the audience. So please put your questions, if you've got any, in the chat, and then we can get and if it's for someone specific, please do specify that as well, and we can ask the panelists. But what I wanted to finish off on is, and I'll start with you, Vicente, what is a recommendation or takeaway that you want the audience to have?
That there are things that we can do and that we can achieve. I mean, I think that these days, I'm talking particularly about me and the team I work with, morals are very low. I mean, it's like we know what's right. There's never been a more clear, perhaps in my professional career over the last 30 years, there has never been a moment where I have seen the north so clearly as I do today, what's right and what's wrong. And at the same time, I've never felt, perhaps the age, but no, I've never felt so powerless and so impotent. But there are things that can be done. I mean, meetings like this, people like those that are supporting us, actions, models, there are things that work. I mean, we discussed in the past, there are models in which we can base our actions to bring accountability, things that work, that are recognized. So for me, the takeaway is that despite the somber times, the dark days, we owe it to those who need us the most these days. So I can't afford being demoralized, or at least not doing today. So that's it.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Vicente. Jessica, what recommendation or takeaway do you have for the audience from today's webinar?
Well, I'm the eternal optimist, though I share a lot of these concerns, of course, and this space, working in this space for over almost 20 years now. It's never a bright sunny day all the time, but indeed there are things we can do, and we shouldn't lose sight of that. We, as citizens, hold the power. Sometimes we forget that because the powers that be, the people with the money, the people that are running the show, seem to try to repress that. And I think that we are in a very worrying time where we're seeing shrinking civil space. We're seeing people who are critical of Israel and their actions in Gaza being silenced, literally killed, the journalists in Gaza who are bold enough to stand up to tell the world what's going on. But I think there are strengths, the strengths in numbers, right? And I think we have a role and responsibility, no matter what walk of life and whatever our profession might be, to stand up and demand accountability from our own governments right at home. So on the local level, join protests, talk to people, have conversations with your neighbors about this stuff. I mean, just don't let it be silenced, and don't let our own voices be silenced. And I think that silence and inaction, it creates a permissive space for abuse. And I think people in power want there to be less friction and less critique. So let's make it difficult for them and raise our voices in different lanes in different ways, because that's the thing that is going to be the hard work. We have to stand up and roll up our sleeves, but it can be done. And that's what we each, I think, on this call live to fight for each day. So it's great to see such a wonderful group of people tuning in as well, who are all very interested to see what kind of part they can play. So join us.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you so much. And Asma?
Yeah, a quick message of hope too, before I get more critical. The fact that we're all here, and the fact that we're doing this work, and the fact that some of us quit their, really good jobs to do this, and some of us are doing it on top of their jobs, some, and that we're able to produce and create, just gives you a bit of an idea of how, what just a small group of people can do. Imagine this now, with more people, with more. And the other thing is have backbone. I mean, backbone. Just, we don't have to accept everything. They want us to believe that, it's too big, but break it down. I've been inside 15 years in big tech. They're not as organized as you think, really. It's not all as a conspiracy. They are just a mess sometimes. So we need to play on all fronts. Let the unions do their work. You guys who are working there still have a stance. We have multiple people working in big tech right now with us in the Alliance. You can still do good things. It's important that also you just distinguish between ethics and ethics washing. Please do, because there are multiple events, multiple influencers on LinkedIn on ethics. Know who to follow, who to, who's actually done some work, some research, because very often some people choose to highlight some harms and not others. And we just stand for either it's, safety and dignity for all, or not. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And I think one thing that I'd probably add to that, which is similar to Vicente and what Jessica said, is it's very, very easy, because I have experienced it, to get downtrodden and to lose hope, but actually channel that like worry, fear, negative emotion into action, and do it by finding your community. So I think that can be a very pivotal and important step in finding the, Asma, like you're saying, a backbone. Sometimes it's strength in numbers, find those numbers, find that community, and find how you can channel whatever it is that you're feeling into positive action. But thank you so much to the panel for answering my questions. I hope that the participants enjoyed it. I'm going to move on to, we've got 12 questions and we've got about just over half an hour to go. So I'll just go through them. So the first question is from Tiff Ryan. Tiff says, I'm from Minnesota, USA. Human in the loop. Are there recommended frameworks humans can use to ensure that they lean towards ethical AI use? And that's just open to, I think maybe Jessica, if you want to take that one.
Yeah, I think I highlighted it earlier. I think we need to move away from the in the loop business, because that's not as meaningful as I think we wanted it to be. I think it was a good starting point, but we're trying to tease out exactly what that means. I think that requires context appropriate human judgment and control, and making sure that it's on a case by case basis. And I think understanding our legal obligations is really important, but then the interpretation needs to bring the ethics into the fold. So understanding civilian protection and mitigating civilian harm is important, not just to the civilians on the ground, but also to the legitimacy of military operations. I think when we start talking about that in a more wholesale way, it doesn't matter if you're using more traditional weapons platforms or AI-enabled systems. if you don't have the core of IHL correct in understanding how much you need to do to mitigate civilian harm, then your technological choice is only going to exacerbate problems. So I think those conversations need to be part of it. But then understanding where responsible military users are using these particular systems, where the kinds of judgment need to be present and what kind they are, and that has to do with like huge amounts of training with this stuff before it can be reliably used on a battlefield, rather than using battlefields as experimental laboratories. And I think that that's, again, in the longer term interest, both from a civilian perspective, but also certainly from a military perspective in the legitimacy of their operations.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Our next question is from Ayla or Ayla. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. What do you think are the best ways for AI technologists to use their technical expertise to contribute to the fight for AI ethics? Asma, do you want to take
Oh,
that one?
that's great. I think I would have loved to have some of the team members here who have the exact sort of have been through this journey. Absolutely, there are so many ways. Your skills, in fact, for those who are, designed, implemented technology, know the process upside down. I think first it's important to carry with you your morals into the design process. I know it's hard because it could feel isolating. I've been there. I tried. You can get pushback. But if you're actually a majority, just like Jessica earlier said, like your line manager, like propose, frameworks, propose education, like awareness and education programs to your company. You can go and have, do proactively look into bringing in more ethics into your way of working and daily work. But by all means, feel free to reach out to us or to other organization. The other thing is volunteering a few hours with an organization. There are plenty by now. There are some specific, specific topics, whether it's digital rights, spyware. Again, we're happy to put you in touch. So there's a range of things you'd be doing. The important thing is that the more you read, the more you know, and then you just spread that message. The better it is, and the more we are, in fact, we can actually have more weight. I know it's hard because of, again, the line management and all, but by now we're seeing a shift, like a major shift. I can tell you there's a major shift, and I think it will help eventually to get the message across eventually. I hope I answered. I'm not sure.
I think just to add to that, from my experience, I know, as you said, some of the team members, probably for myself, because I've gone through this exact journey. So my background is consultancy. I wasn't feeling that there was a lot of value alignment, and I'm an AI ethicist and looking at governance, but it felt very empty. Again, frameworks, but no accountability, a lack of action. And one of the ways that I've managed to find this community and Ethical AI Alliance is by connecting and following people whose work is aligned to my values and that I respect. So, for example, I found Asma through Clause Zero on LinkedIn, reached out, and I was like, how can I get involved? Please let me know, I'll do anything. I have all these skills, I don't know how to use them.
And I'm so glad you did.
Thank you. So I would say, yeah, follow and look out for organizations, people who align with your values and what you want to do. And usually there's a lot more serendipity than I think we realize. So yeah, hope that helps. The next question is from Sandra. So I think she's saying, very much agree, Jessica, to a point you made earlier in the session. I think individual ethical responsibility and individual duty of care is a must in deploying these systems. I study AI governance and policymaking in conflict-affected countries. Could you speak to what rights or legal mechanisms conflict-affected/developing countries have in dictating the deployment of these tools in their territories?
Yeah, big question, an important question. I think my first response would be to talk with people like you who are working in those spaces and talk to affected countries, developing countries, about what they're experiencing. and how they're experiencing it, and then what kind of things they might need. And that way that can start giving indications on how maybe I could start thinking about how to help them. I think, look, the plain answer would be that the legal mechanisms that are available are the ones that are available to everyone. And that's the beautiful thing, and why I still defend my career choice as an international lawyer. The flip side of that coin, of course, is the enforcement mechanism. International law is only as robust as countries politically make it, and that has been the most frustrating thing, certainly I'd say over the last 20 years for myself, and seeing how these inequalities play out. But it doesn't mean that the law is not meaningful because countries are failing to uphold it. And I want to make sure that at that point is really important. And that means it takes, again, rolling up our sleeves, lobbying our politicians to take a stand, to grow that backbone, to say, look, there's a genocide happening and we need to stop it, right? Like, it's our legal responsibility to step in and stop supplying weapons, or to stop the supply chain from happening, right? These are courageous decisions that must be made at a political level in order to uphold the law. But it first, again, starts with having everyone be part of the conversation and getting everybody at the table. So I hope that helps. Thanks.
Thanks, Jessica. Vicente?
Something that we can remember is that all the countries that we're making reference to today, be it in the global north and the global south, are members of the United Nations. And less than 2 weeks ago, the UN approved by a majority a resolution in which they will be calling for two things. One is a technical panel that are going to be discussing technical issues related to AI, and then a dialogue. The dialogue needs to be defined. Now, something very practical is to lobby through the ministries of foreign affairs, which are the ones that have representation in New York towards the UN, to lobby for the development of a tool that has teeth, rather than being simply, something to be nice on paper. So that's a very practical step that works wonders. And there are very good precedents of works done in that sense. And in my case, I can discuss about the UN resolution on children in conflict and the crimes committed against children in conflict. And every single year, the UN Assembly proposes a report to the Secretary General in which they analyze the status of children, crime, and conflict. They produce a list of perpetrators and a number of recommendations. So building something similar for AI or any other situation, it is indeed feasible through lobbying through ministries of foreign affairs who have a representation in the assemblies. And that's not that difficult because they listen. This internal politics, domestic politics, and they listen.
Thank you so much, Vicente. Our next question comes from Diana, and Diana asks, how can design help make AI governance more clear and accessible to people?
Design? Did you
Yes.
say design? Okay,
Yes.
great. Yeah, I can take this one because I'm a big fan of design. In fact, we've used some of the participatory design in our map. Big believer I am in justice design. If you haven't read the book, please do, of Costanza. Really like community-led design and what it means to bring justice, like real justice, into the work you're doing. And I think that's what we want. We're trying, aiming, prototyping with the map. One of the ways we've done that, before I give you a more generic answer, was for us to collaborate directly with an organization on the ground called Hamla. It's an Arab Center for Social Media. I believe this is their exact nomination, but they're based in Palestine. So they've been reporting and working on documenting occurred harm in their region and the broader Middle East for a while. So we sat together and listened to their story and their perspective and how they've been collecting this data. And we actually took it and visualized it in our map. The map will be public eventually on our website, so don't worry. You'll be able to zoom on that region, and you'll be able to see the points and the documented harm that we've worked together with this. And this is just an example. If you were doing participatory design, you need to work with the communities, amplify their voices, center them, but not just. It's funny because some of this has been taken just very almost. There's a timing aspect to this, not just at the design phase, but like throughout the entire process, through entire testing, feedback. And again, because things change, things move, and it's not by bringing in one diversity hire or quota to the team that you think your product is. And I've seen that is something I've seen. It doesn't work. It needs to be a genuine motivation to understand that community and to center it. I think the map for us is a great, prototype and example for that. I encourage you to go, sit, listen, be able to challenge your own beliefs. Yeah, again, like there's plenty of projects going on that needs volunteers. There's a lot to do in terms of, grassroots, participatory, justice-oriented work. If this is something of interest of many, we could even help maybe put down a list in the next couple of weeks. But yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Our next question comes from Kevin. So Kevin says, "Hi, I'm Kevin and I'm leading various AI for Parents initiatives. I often feel very overwhelmed though, and sometimes have down days thinking, how can we possibly compete with those billion-dollar companies? Any ideas on what we can do on a parental level?" And I'm gonna ask Vicente to weigh on this first, if that's all right. You're on mute.
Sorry, thanks God I was on mute. Well, what can be done from, I have two daughters, age 20 and 18, so they're not that young anymore. And I was astonished to see that the youngest one believes that ChatGPT is perfect, but can not provide the wrong answer because it's a machine, it's a computer. So for her, it was the perfect mate because it provided answers to all her questions on the one hand, like the Delphos Oracula, and on the other hand, the answers were as powerful and as exact as a calculator. So both things together were a very, very powerful weapon on her hand. So in my case, the first thing I did was trying to work her out of the idea that whatever she's consulting through AI is not infallible, that needs to be cross-checked and verified. The other thing that I'm doing, and that's on a professional level, but directed at children, is that in every single program that we are implementing, related or not with AI, we are introducing a module on AI literacy, explaining the children and the parents what is and what is not AI, what to expect and what not to expect. Another thing that we are doing is that we are documenting the harms that are being caused to the children of our programs by the wrong use of those softwares, and compiling them and bringing them to the attention of the politicians, which is something that we normally do with a number of things. So I understand very well this unfair and unjust fight. I am me with my hands against a very powerful machine that is oiled with millions of dollars and has a huge propaganda machine. But the only thing that in my case, I recommend doing is that having frank and constant discussions with the children around me, proving them what works and doesn't work, advising them to discuss with teachers, parents, and older people that know what they're talking about, and then documenting, reporting, and introducing literacy, AI literacy in everything we do, be it directly related with AI or not. I mean, in nutrition programs, we are doing that. In assisting children in the move that arrive to Spain to the Canary Islands, we are doing it. Because AI surveillance, bias, algorithm, everything is permeating through the whole lives. So they need to have a counterbalance, the speech directly addressing them every single day.
Thank you, Vicente. Asma?
I just wanted to build on Vicente's answer and say that, and outside even the children example, which I think gave a really a great answer. Like, how do you how do you try to fight for justice when this is too big, too complicated? I'd say, and again, these are my 2 cents, like break it down, like divide and conquer. It is not one entity, it is not one problem. In fact, it's multiple at the same time. Like Vicente said, the one aspect, which is AI literacy, that is within our control. That's something at least we can raise a literacy and awareness. Then there's also politically, you know, depending where you are, you can vote. You can actually sort of direct regulation. You can, there is, you know, grassroots movement, you know, there's activism there. So there are ways, but it won't be, I'm afraid in this whole topic, there's never one answer. I wish there was one way. Even we've been like trying to solve for this issue for a while. It's going to be multiple fronts at the same time, so that somehow it hurts in multiple sides of the body, and then eventually they'll react to some legal cases here and there to set the tone. Just unfortunately, like this sad case of self-harm in the US that's maybe setting a precedent, and etc. I think back to you, Vicente.
No, sorry, something that I forgot that is helping us a lot is bringing the debate to the consequences. Rather than having a technological debate, is having a debate about the consequences. So for instance, when recently this teenager committed suicide, we had a debate around mental health and the role that technology had in enabling or disabling these tendencies. So because everybody understands what a teenage in danger is and the consequences of having a teenage that is inclined to some sort of mental problems, being nurtured or being punished. So the consequences, the debate about the consequences was very clarifying. Everybody understood. Everybody understands what an AI fake is about his or her daughter. Everybody understands that. So they don't need to understand, I mean, much about technology, but they see the problems that an uncontrolled device, an uncontrolled software is causing for their children. And then the debate ends and everybody starts feeling concerned and feeling the need to do something. And then you can, of course, start proposing things. So consequences matter for people, and that are very clearing. They clear the view very clear.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you, Asma. Thank you, Vicente. We got a question from Jonathan, and he says, has there been any considerations for engaging university students, undergraduate and graduate? None of my coursework is covering this. Everything that I've learned has come from following initiatives like Ethical AI Alliance.
I can take stab at this one. In fact, you know, if you join the team that or the community, that we have multiple people actually in universities. We're starting an university ambassador program precisely for this feedback. I genuinely didn't know. I thought ethics was embedded in coursework in universities. I haven't been in university for a while. So knowing, learning from some of our team members that they were kind of surprised and like learning, and I'm like, haven't you learned this in this school? So we definitely welcome university and we want to engage more. We have an ambassador in the University of Edinburgh, University also of Bocconi, and a few others. So for sure, I don't know, Jessica's raising her hand, so I'll let you finish.
I just wanted to say that even if it's not in a structured way, like there are these things out there. There are two things I want to say. One was there are structured things. So the Lawful by Design initiative I mentioned earlier, we were actually searching for, at this moment, there's an application procedure open for student ambassadors. So people who are very interested in it, there's information on our website. I'm happy to share that with you. But that's one structured way, but unstructured way as well. Like if this is something that moves you, many universities, at least from my perspective, I went to the University of Kansas in the United States like 100 years ago, but we had opportunities to set up student clubs, student groups. And this is back to an earlier point that we raised. If you're interested in it, make it a topic of conversation. You're not the only one interested in it. And if there's like a little bit of a critical mass to get together, even over drinks or pizza or whatever, I don't know, I'm like trying to be hip with college kids these days, beer and pizza. Like you can make it sort of happen organically, right? And I think that there's a lot of power in organizing in that way, even if it's not offered in your coursework. And if it's not offered in your coursework, maybe find other coursework, like come and join my master's program and we could talk about it in my courses. Find places where this is being discussed or make it part of the agenda.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, both. We've got another question from Sarah. And Sarah asks, have you discussed international standards processes for practical integration of human rights into AI development? It's quite a big question.
I can answer. We've definitely, I mean, if by international standards, we're looking at, for example, in AI governance at ISO 42001, for example, or IEEE and so forth. We did look into them. Yeah, I obviously, but here's the thing. There's a huge focus by these organizations in providing technical safety and safety safeguards, right? As opposed to a community-led and justice-oriented and human rights-oriented approach. There are a couple of frameworks, such as Hudiera, for example, but they're non-binding, completely voluntary frameworks, not enforceable. So see now the landscape. You have standards, for that gives you kind of quality, but what is quality if my spyware is certified quality and it's good to go, but it's actually being used to harm the children that, in Gaza? What does that even mean? And that's where it's just very so confusing, because in that process of certification, at no point has there been questions about human rights violation, etc. We know because we've looked at them, literally analyzed them, and we're born with this alliance, and this community is born precisely because there was this gap. And we don't say that we shouldn't use them, but it would be nice to incorporate or add to them, that this aspect. But it takes really a community of, multidisciplinary, but also global people who care, with human rights oriented people to kind of raise this question. Now I thought it would be like, it's taken for granted that if you certify my technology and ISO, that okay, it's certified and it shouldn't harm. No, it is not. And this is, you're going to start looking at all the assumptions that you thought you can actually break down, one by one, and understand that nothing means nothing. In fact, it's just human rights is still here, governance is still here, harm is still happening. We showed you on the map. That's a map we've done in 3-4 weeks. Imagine what we'd do if we were actually working on it for years. That's just a taste. So I think we need to speak more together with more with these bodies if they're willing. We've engaged. We're hoping to cooperate more, and if not, then be it. We are forming our own watchdog, grassroots, independent, to show society, civil society led, and maybe hopefully also embedded in the UN human rights violation system.
Yeah. Sarah just followed on to say, I ask as I agree, there's a big disconnect between these organizations and human rights campaigners. We need to find ways to lobby for that. Your knowledge is crucial. Vicente, do you want to add something? Oh, sorry. I thought you were, no problem. Thank you for that question, Sarah. We have one from Elizabeth. I want to elaborate on what Asma mentioned in regards to ethical AI in the corporate world. The word ethics is thrown around, but they rarely actually deal with ethics. What are ways in which we can develop and implement transparent conversations on the ethics of AI and demand companies and organizations uphold ethical standards and not just governance compliance? So basically the $1 million question.
Literally, yes. That my boss used to say, the exam question, solve it. But it's a brilliant question. I think you've nailed it. Literally, that's the problem we're all here trying to solve for, right? In my opinion, and there are multiple level. Internal, first of all, internal versus external. I used to be internal, so in that you need to carry, your ethics with you in your day-to-day work and try, right? Hey, have we done? If I were in Microsoft and I was in Amazon for Microsoft during the, the whole data server / I'm not even sure that project would have been NDA, to be honest. I'm trying to look at it and try to understand how it bypassed every single stage of due diligence necessary to do a hyperscale migration. It was 11.5 petabytes, which in cloud migration, in terms of vocabulary, that's already in the larger scale. Huge banks do usually pan-European banks, around 20. This is big. Usually something like this would trigger some processes, right? If I were working there and I cared about ethics and I saw the military contract, the handshake and stuff like that, I'll probably raise this issue internally. Of course, there's whole like fear of, repercussions and consequences with HR, but there are unions, there are, so internally organized. I know there's also like a lot of people organizing within corporate. We've all heard about movements such as, no tech for apartheid, no Asia for apartheid. I know they've been dismissed quickly, and so on, but they're doing really great work in raising awareness with the mainstream. So internally, it's definitely more hostile. Externally now, you can lend a hand to all of these organizations working on trying to pressure, like civil society pressuring big tech, whether through human rights approach or digital rights approach. The way you can connect with these people is go into conferences such as, RightsCon, such as there's multiple, MozFest, and those, you'll see those kind of people. They tend to be always the same people, but I think it should get more mainstream and more people should go there to connect with I don't have an answer for you. This is exactly what we're trying to build, like what is accountability and providing tools. And also for people who, like you, are within organization and feel guilty and want to contribute. We want to help create some sort of infrastructure, some sort of network for the people who can join from within companies and contribute. So we do, and a lot of our people here to, working and who provided this map also are actually working and supporting us on top of their job as well.
Just to build on that, I think from consultancy and from my experience, which Asma, I'm sure you'll be able to recognize a lot of similar patterns, but the reason that companies rarely, or especially in the corporate world, deal with ethics is because it's not a moneymaker. It's absolutely not a moneymaker. And we hear very often that, AI governance or ethics is red tape, it stifles innovation. So I think where we are at now, you're probably better placing your energy through grassroots organizations, as Asma said, to demand that accountability and actually help create that movement that then triggers the governance, the policy that then will make corporate pay attention. I think that's probably the process of sequence that needs to happen. But yeah, really, thank you so much for that question. We are coming up towards the end, so we're at 22 minutes past. I'll take another few questions. So I do apologize. I'm going to be a little bit selective with the questions so we can get through a few more of them quickly. We've got one from Richard. Hi, Richard. Thanks for the fascinating, inspiring, urgent discussion. I have lots to digest from this. My question is, how do we incentivize ethics as a practice in business? So this is my co-founder, which is why shout out to Richard. But yeah, does anyone want to take that?
I love the topic of ROI, of ethics. I think we should invest more time into actually providing maybe like price tags. I know that I used to talk ROI and everything, so I understand the need for such right now. I think the way to approach it is probably risk mitigation. What is the price tag for risk? How much, if you breach this EAIA Act, and what's the reputational damage rate and risk that you're, how can we, we can quantify it, that it's actually, based on historical data and other cases. Also, yeah, other than that, I think we need to also look into the demand for ethical, technology. And we know that Gen Z is more conscious, for example, for the environment, planet, humanity overall. We've seen that a big majority of Gen Z, at least in the US, if I'm aware, are, against the genocide. They've been very outspoken. We've seen what happens, the student encampments. So what does it tell us about the future generation coming, that they care? So if you were to look into a business only perspective, maybe there is something really, there's a market there, there's a win-win situation. You make money and you make also a technology that's that serves humanity. And the other thing, maybe one other sort of angle, which is different, but look at Africa. And one of my favorite topics that brings me hope personally in this crazy world is looking at Afrofuturism. And Afrofuturism gives you, it's something you don't even hear about, you know, in Europe, and it gives you really nice use cases of, like, it's about imagining. So imagination is a form of resistance. The problem is that even our imagination is colonized, and it's dictated by the fantasy of a couple of, you know, white supremacists that want, you know, AGI, and are imposing this on us. Nobody, I know at least, has ever dreamt of that that future. We want technology, but we wanted to cure cancer. We wanted to solve, you know, predictability of hurricanes. So we wanted to, you know, help with agriculture, so we feed ourselves without harming animals, etc., etc. Just enough. And from what I've seen and what I've, you know, heard, is a lot of nice use cases out there, you know, in African countries that just don't make it here. We don't hear enough of them. You have to go proactively. They also lack infrastructure and cloud compute to bring that, you know, technology to scale. But it's an amazing collection of ideas and projects. Right next conference of RightsCon is going to take place in Africa, and I think there, for example, is a nice way to look at really at the ecosystem. I took a little bit of a different road, but I just really wanted to highlight that also as a part of the answer.
Absolutely. We've, I think, got time for one more question. There's 13 more, so please do forgive me if I don't get around to yours. I'm trying to find one that is answerable the next minute or so. There's one specifically for Vicente, sorry. Can Vicente repeat the figures on the different rates of children casualties in Ukraine and Gaza? Why this difference? It can't be only technology.
Yes. The figures are 37.7 of all those who have been killed in Gaza have been children. The same figure in Ukraine is less than 1%, 0.3%. Now, you need to be very cautious with these figures. What I'm saying is those are real figures. I mean, you can use them, but the implication is that there have been a specific targeting of children in Gaza and not in Ukraine. That's controversial. Why? Because prior October, already half of the population in Gaza was under 18. So they are overrepresented in the statistics. I mean, on itself, 0.5% of the population in Ukraine were not under 18 when the war started. But between 37.7 and 0.3, there is a lot of space for drawing very serious consequences. Now, but the fact that what you need to think of in Gaza is that regardless of the 37% or the 20 or the 40%, is that when you have such a small place where you know in advance that half of the population are children, when you know that they have nowhere to run, nowhere to escape, no safe haven, no protection system in place, what Jessica was mentioning before, the due diligence doesn't need to take 20 seconds, but it needs to take 20 hours. And this has not happened. So again, figures are real, 37.7, 0.3, take them with a pinch of salt, but regardless of the figures, I mean, there is a flagrant violation of all international humanitarian law happening in Gaza before our eyes, and atrocities are being committed on a daily basis.
Thank you, Vicente. Thank you so much to everyone who's asked questions. I've tried to make a note of the questions we didn't get to answer, and maybe at a future event we can try and get some answers. But please do connect with us on LinkedIn, have a look at what we're doing at Ethical AI Alliance, because I think it does address a lot of the questions that people had that we couldn't cover. Thank you so much to the panel, Jessica, Vicente, Asma. This was fantastic. And as you can see from the dialogue, it's been what people are really needing. There's this missing conversation and dialogue that's not happening at this level and this scale. And we hope to continue to do that. Is there any last minute words that you want to say before we conclude today's webinar?
I think that there are several legal advisors on some of the questions that I've seen. I really hope that this is just an invitation to an open dialogue about understanding legal reviews. So not just thinking of them as weapons reviews, but new technologies reviews, that the obligation extends to new means and methods of war. So broadening our scope, not just thinking about the bullets and the bombs, but also these new technologies that enable new shifts in war. And that conversation we can pick up as legal advisors, I think, is part of our obligation. So just speaking directly to you, I'm open. Please do reach out. I'm happy to continue the conversation. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I wanted to say thank you, Sidrah, for such a great, he's such a great host, you know, all the intersections and highlighting all the things that matter. Just thank you to our panelists, and yes, join the community, follow us on LinkedIn. We are exactly trying to address that feeling, you know, of guilt and not knowing what to do by providing, you know, sort of toolkits and ways we can influence decision, we can make provide transparency, accountability, one project at a time, one webinar at a time. So by all means, student, professional, senior level, you're all welcome everywhere in the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you to Rebecca, who is part of our Ethical AI Alliance and has been moderating the questions and all the logistics behind the scenes.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Thank you to all the participants. And yeah, please do reach out to us, reach out to the panelists. And yes, we'll hopefully see you soon with more updates. Thank you. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.